Hi folks, welcome to your MWIS Winter Planner. This updated on Friday the 3rd of February. The general outlook is going to see high pressure quite close to Britain as we go forwards through the next week or so, generally centred toward the south, and that allowing some weather fronts off the Atlantic to at times influence west and northern Scotland, bringing mostly small amounts of rain or upland snow. Temperatures will tend to vary a little bit, sometimes some milder air dragged in, but often the temperatures on the mountains near or only just above freezing point, and we'll see some frost overnight in valleys and glens. Strongest winds typically across more northern regions. Looking at the general pressure patterns for the next couple of weeks, and the first week ahead shows high pressure still fairly extensive across Britain and much of Europe, more so than maybe was looking likely even a week or so ago. If you remember last week's video, the signal was for somewhat lower pressure. Well, that's still away toward the north and Iceland, so any sort of west by southwesterly flows are more grazing across northern Scotland, whereas further southwards we're under the influence of higher pressure for this week ahead. And the exact position of the high then as we go to the end of the week is quite uncertain. It's a common thing in forecasting actually that these big highs can be quite tricky to pin down exactly where they go to, but to some extent that area of high pressure will steer weather systems away from us during much of the week ahead, except still maybe, as I say, for northwest Scotland. The signal is fairly weak as we go forwards, and it does suggest that the high retreats south and eastwards. Now, not all model simulations completely agree with that as we go through mid-month, but this is where this particular chart goes, and the relatively lower pressure toward the north is the one that is around. So, fairly mixed conditions still across west and northern Scotland coming in off the Atlantic, with some varied freezing levels up and down from day to day. Further south, maybe something drier more often. So, still some reasonably dry conditions in the mix, but particularly across Scotland, perhaps some more Atlantic influences coming in at times. Taking a look at the freezing level, and we start the weekend with temperatures above freezing point to the higher mountains, but a cold front will come down from the northwest during Saturday, and that will be quite an abrupt drop of temperature and freezing level, down below freezing then to around 800 metres across the highlands during the afternoon, 600 metres as we head onwards into the evening, and that lowering freezing level extending further south over England and Wales overnight as well. Touch of frost to be found in a few valleys and glens first thing Sunday morning. We'll typically just lift above freezing point towards some higher slopes during Sunday, but will hover close to 0 Celsius on the mountains much of the day. A frost to come overnight into Monday for many places then at low elevations, and temperatures on the mountains will be hovering around freezing point or just above during the daytime. Quite a complicated situation really developing into the middle of the week, where we will see some frost overnight into many valleys and glens in inland regions, and some lower slopes near to freezing point as well, at least in the mornings, even some higher slopes close to freezing point, and really only just a few degrees or so above at best. But there may be some local inversion situations where higher slopes are indeed milder than lower down at times during the week ahead. So some varied conditions, not a huge drop of temperature with height is the main message there. So trying to express a genuine freezing level is a little bit more complicated than sometimes might be the case. Quite typical once you're under a fairly high pressure situation. It's a huge amount of fresh snowfall to come then. This is the lying snow situation as we go onwards, and really it's just what's already in existence across the Highlands, which is relatively patchy, but in places still some compacted snow to be found over the higher mountain tops. But as I roll things on, small amounts of precipitation at most, really, giving very little fresh accumulations. There's some suggestion around Tuesday that maybe a front can just give some snowfalls into the Highlands, but the chart doesn't really fill in too dramatically over a good number of days ahead. Do be aware of some icy conditions though in places, especially where there has been some thawing and then some refreezing of the surfaces, so that's just one to bear in mind. In terms of the general weather conditions overall, Saturday sees that cold front coming southwards, as we talked about on the freezing level. That will lower the temperatures through the day. A spell of rain, quite heavy for a while, will then transition to snow quite rapidly on its back edge, and some snow showers will then follow in from the west. A blustery day, winds to gale force across the top, suddenly very gusty ahead of that front as it moves southwards. Some damp and drizzly conditions over western hills in England and Wales. Sunday is a much better day overall, with high pressure over the country. Still some blustery and gusty winds around the periphery of that, especially western and northwestern parts of Scotland, and locally could be surprisingly gusty in a few spots elsewhere, but winds relatively light for much of England and Wales, and lots of sunshine to be found. Some superb visibility across the mountains. Cloud just thickening a little bit in western Scotland. It might even be enough to drag some lower cloud banks onto the hills near the coast as time goes on. Otherwise, though, it's a good looking day. Monday too stays fine for most places. Again, those gusty winds to watch out for, especially in northern and western regions once more, and some low cloud possible on some coastal hill slopes here. But away from that, it should be a generally bright one. Just the extent of some cloud around westernmost hills in England and Wales is more uncertain, so just be aware of that. But it will be essentially dry for most. Tuesday brings a weakening cold front into the mix, so more in the way of cloud overall, and that giving some light precipitation, a bit of snow, a few flurries over some of the hills, not amounting to too much, but just something there at times. The exact push of that front southwards is uncertain, but any amounts of precip across England and Wales should be small, but cloud amounts may well be greater onto the hills, and some gusty winds around in places as well. Those could just be quite variable. By Wednesday, it's a chillier air mass that is over the top of us again, I suspect, by this stage. Not too much of precipitation around. Some varied banks of cloud and a few fog patches could be down in some of the valleys and the glens, but otherwise should be a fairly bright and dry day. As always, you can keep right up to date with the latest information for your area on our website. That is your winter planner. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.